Hey there, friends. If you can't hear me, I'm going to urge you to turn up the volume. Because I'm a smart recorder, I don't know how well it's coming through. I know that it can be heard, but make sure you're turning up the volume to the highest level that you can. I'm just going to walk through the day 5 notes with you. Just a side note, there is a quiz tomorrow, and it's on day 1 through 5. So this will be included in that quiz. It's not going to be a heavy hitter on the quiz, but make sure that you are at least getting these notes done, attempting the Math Excel homework so you have a little practice into what you've done. Excuse me. All right, so today is all about completing the square. You guys have completed the square before. It's something you worked on in algebra, so it's not completely foreign. We're just going to go back to some of the tactics, the things that you'd want to use in terms of getting it done. Now, completing the square, just like quadratic formula, is a method of solving a quadratic equation that works all the time. It's just that if we can't factor, sometimes this is the best option, because if you get used to it and you get fluent in this process, you can really do completing the square quite quickly. So it can also be used, aside from just solving, so again, solving is when we have it equal to 0. Aside from that, we could also change the equation from standard form, which looks like this, to vertex form, which looks like this. So y equals x minus h squared plus k. Now, once you have it in this form right here, that's called vertex form. The vertex is simply the h value and the k value. So a combination of the x value, or the number that's inside with the x, and the number that's on the outside, that becomes your vertex. Small thing, well, technically, I'm sorry, there should be an a that you sneak in front of this. So let me rewrite this. Y equals a times x minus h squared plus k at the end there. So if the a is greater than 0, that means it's positive. That means your graph will look like this. And if a is less than 0 or negative, as we've saw before with the standard form, it just flips it upside down. So things to think about as you're working through this stuff. But anyway, again, you guys have done this before. We're going to use it today to solve. So figure out what x is equal to. If the equation is equal to 0, you'll also see it in terms of figuring out what the vertex form is, and then also what the vertex itself is. So there's that little introduction. Now, how do we complete the square, especially if a is equal to 1? First things first, and this is going to happen with every time, or every equation that we need to solve for x when x is squared, get it equal to 0. So I'm going to do that now. If you subtract 12x from both sides, it becomes minus 12x on this side, and it goes away on the other side. So this will be plus 5 is equal to 0. All right, so now you have that. Great. Second step is to insert a plus and a minus blank after the b term. So it's going to look like this: x squared minus 12x plus blank minus blank plus 5 is equal to 0. Now what goes in those blanks? That's what step 3 is for. It's always going to be b divided by 2 squared. In this case, the 12 is your b term, negative 12 technically. So negative 12 divided by 2 squared, that's negative 6 squared, which is 36. So 36 goes here and there. Now technically, step 4 is saying factor the perfect square trinomial, meaning this chunk should be factored into 2 parentheses. Essentially what always is going to happen, I'm going to kind of walk through the whole thing for you here, but there's a trick, a hack to get you from here pretty much to an end result. So if I factored this, I would get x minus 6 and x minus 6, because negative 6 times negative 6 is positive 36. You add them together, you get negative 12. So that would be why they factored that way. These guys can be simplified to give you negative 31, and that's going to equal 0. Now, if you have x minus 6 and x minus 6, that can also be represented as x minus 6 squared, which is actually where we want to get to in the first place in this whole completing the square process. Now here's that hack that I mentioned, that trick. If you look at the original trinomial, so if you look at negative 12, that b term, what goes in here, what will always go in this squared parentheses, is always just b over 2. Negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. That's why this is going to be negative 6. So b over 2 squared, that's for your blanks. That's filling in these pluses and minuses. If you get to the parentheses at the end, that's just b over 2. So if you need to run this back, like pause this, go back and watch it again. This is the vertex form. Now I just need to solve for x by using inverse operations. So I'm going to add 31 to both sides. I'll get, I'm going to move this over here. I'll have x minus 6 squared is equal to 31. At that point, we're trying to get rid of the square, take the square root. You get x minus 6 is equal to, now here's the kicker, you got to put a plus minus in front of that because we did it to both sides. This will end up being 31, plus or minus 31. Then you just add 6 to both sides. You cannot add this 6 to the radical. So it just kind of sits in front of the plus minus. It's going to be x equals 6 plus or minus the square root of 31. So that, in a nutshell, is completing the square. Yes, it's going to get a little bit more complex, but these steps, these 5 steps, will always remain the same. So just kind of follow through with everything that you're seeing here, and you'll be able to complete the square no problem if a is equal to 1. With a being bigger than 1, things change a little bit, but that's essentially really the nuts and bolts. All right, so on the next page, we got some practice. So I'm going to do one of them for you and with you. Actually, I'm going to do both of them. I lied, just because the one at the bottom is going to end up with some fractions. So I want to kind of show you what that should look like. I'm going to walk through them fairly quickly, though, so you can pause, rewind if you need to. But first things first, putting blanks because it's already equal to 0. X squared plus 8x plus blank minus 11 is equal to 0. Now, in these blanks, remember the blanks are equal to b over 2 squared. So 8 divided by 2 is 4 squared and 16. This is going to turn into technically x plus 4 times x plus 4. Well, that's what this factors into. And this is minus 27 over here. Now again, there's a trick that I want you guys to get used to. As you get from here to here to here, all you have to do is look at the b term, which was 8, and divide it by 2, and you end up with your squared binomial here. That's just because you have 2 of these, x plus 4 and x plus 4, they get squared. But to kind of skip past this step, you can just say, well, 8 divided by 2 is going to get me to the x plus 4 that I need in there. So this will be minus 27 is equal to 0. Now we're just solving. Add 27 to both sides. You get x plus 4 squared is equal to 27. Square root. X plus 4 is equal to plus minus square root of 27. Move that 4 over, and you'll end up with x equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 27. Now 27 you can break down, so we try and do that if we can. This will be x equals negative 4 plus or minus. This will be negative 3, so that will be 3 radical 3. There's your answer. There's your solution. You're good. Okay, down below, and this is why that trick and hack I've been trying to explain to you is going to be so important, and I'll talk to you about that in the next step or so. But first things first, it's equal to 0, wonderful, plus blank, minus blank, minus 28 is equal to 0. So what goes in the blanks? That again comes back to this, b over 2 squared. Negative 3 divided by 2 squared is 9 over 4. So 9 over 4 here, 9 over 4 there. Now, factoring this is going to be a pain in the butt. So if you know the hack, if you know that it's just really the b term divided by 2 that gets you into these squared parentheses, you can get this pretty simply. X minus 3 over 2 squared. That's going to end up giving you the same thing as what you have in that box. Now, minus 9 over 4, minus 28. Use your calculator for that, or if you want to, you can create some common denominators, but I would suggest going with the method of the calculator. They're going to help with those fractions there. It ends up being negative 121 over 4, and that's equal to 0. Now we're just moving things around, trying to solve for x. So I'm going to add 121 over 4, because we're now subtracted. That's going to leave us with x minus 3 over 2 squared is equal to 121 over 4, square root, square root. Notice that 121 and 4 are both perfect squares. So this is going to end up being x minus 3 over 2 equals, plus minus still, 11 over 2. If I add, to finish the problem, the 3 over 2, now plus minus 11 over 2. Remember, the plus minus really does give you two separate answers. So if you do x equals 3 over 2 plus 11 over 2, that's 14 over 2, which is 7. And then if you do a minus version, that's negative 8 over 2, which is negative 4. So there's your two answers for this particular question. I only show you that because, again, the plus minus, it's important to note that that's going to give you two answers when you're doing the process. All right, so for this next piece, it gets a little tricky and muddy when you have something in front of the x squared. So if a is not equal to 1, here's what we're going to do in those particular cases. So again, if this is going too fast, pause it, rewind it, go back and do it again. The first thing you need to do is pull out the a value from a, b, then shove c down. Sounds like a lot of weird phrasing, but just stay with me here. So I'm going to start by pulling the 4 off of, and kind of almost as a GCF of sorts, I'm going to pull it off of the first piece, the A piece, the B piece as well. So this will end up being minus 1/2 x. Now inside these parentheses, I'm going to put a plus blank, and then outside I'm going to put a blank, and then minus 5 equals 0. I'm going to ring a little bit. Now once you've done this, and I guess the reason that we do that is you can't complete the square if a is not 1. So we pull the 4 off so that it is 1, and you end up with this piece. Now you just have to fill in that blank as you would before. So again, b over 2 squared, negative 1 over 2 squared. That ends up being negative 1/4 squared, which is 1/16. So 1/16 goes here. Now here's the kicker, and this is why it gets a little bit tricky. This blank, although it says 1/16, you're not going to put negative 1/16 out there necessarily in that other blank. You want to make sure that it balances whatever you're putting here. So technically, this is 4 times that 1/16. 4 times 1/16 is 1/4. So to balance a 1/4, we would put a negative 1/4 out here. So then it would become 4, and then x minus 1/4 squared. That's because negative 1/2 divided by 2 is negative 1/4. Then you've got negative 1/4 minus 5, which I believe is negative 21 over 4. That's equal to 0. Again, still getting a little bit weird, but we're getting there. Start solving. So add 21 over 4 to both sides. Looks like this. Okay, divide the 4 from both sides. So as you divide this side by 4, it ends up being 21 over 16. And it essentially goes into the bottom of that fraction. So you take the square root here, square root there. X minus 1/4 is equal to plus minus 21. We don't know the square root of, but we do know the square root of 16. So this is the plus minus square root 21 over 4. Now we can add the 1/4 over, plus minus square root 21 over 4, and there is our answer. So again, This is only going to happen if the number in front of x squared is not 1. It's our responsibility to pull that number off the a and the b, because we can't complete the square unless the a value is 1. So I'm going to do this one very quickly. Again, pause, rewind as you need to. So I'm going to pull the 9 off of this. It's going to be x squared minus 12 over 9, which I guess would reduce to, if you divide them both by 3, 4 over 3x plus blank inside there. Put another blank out there. It's going to then be minus 2 is equal to 0. That's what I mean when I shove the c value down. This blank is going to get filled in with negative 4 over 3 divided by 2 squared. So that's going to be negative 4 over 6 squared, which is 16 over 36. So 16 over 36 here. Again, we need to balance. So 9 times 16 over 36 is going to be, if you use your calculator, that ends up being 4. So to balance that, you would put minus 4 out here. It's going to be 9, and then x minus 4 over 6. And dividing this by 2, you'll get 4 over 6. Or you could reduce that to 2/3 if you really wanted to. Squared minus 6 is equal to 0. So I'm going to reduce this to 2/3. X minus 2 over 3 squared is equal to 6. Divide the 9, divide the 9. You end up eventually with x equals 2/3 plus or minus, after you do that square root stuff, the square root of 6 over 3, and eventually when you square root 9, that's going to end up being 3. So there's your answer. This is as complex as completing the square gets. The thing is, it works for everything. It just gets complex with some fractions and such. But as far as what's going to be on the quiz tomorrow, it won't be as crazy as something like this. It's going to be more like the example you saw in the beginning. All right, so vertex form. If you use the same process to find vertex form, as far as doing the blanks and all of that, you'll end up finding a vertex from the equation itself. So if you did this and put in blanks after the b, so plus blank, minus blank, plus 2, filled this in, b over 2 squared is 3 squared, which is 9. And then this becomes x plus 3 squared minus 7. These two pieces become your vertex. Now it's always the opposite of your number with the parentheses, so it's negative 3, and then this number is the exact same, so minus 7. That right there is your vertex. So that's why this is called vertex form, because you can pull your vertex right out of it. It's just a matter of completing the square to get there. Number 7, I want you to write in vertex form and say the vertex. Notice that the number in front of the x squared is not 1, so you have to pull that off of just the first two pieces, so x squared minus 2x, and then plus blank, blank, and then plus 3. Towards the end of that, this will be 1, again, balance, 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 3 times 1 is 3, so this will be a minus 3 out there. This will be 3 times x minus 1 squared. This is nothing, so it's x minus 1 in the parentheses, so your vertex, think of this as plus 0, it'll be 1 comma 0, and that's it. Okay, friends, that's vertex form, that's completing the square. Please watch this and rewind and go back and watch all the examples. Your Math Excel homework, very, very similar. Tomorrow you will have a quiz. Thanks for working through this. Get your homework done. Get your studying in. Quiz comes tomorrow, and then I'll be back on Wednesday. Thanks. See you.